Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back David Icke.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. I got a present. Okay, so the next section is how that knowledge we looked at before is used to create this Orwellian state that's unfolding. The one that makes us believe, or wants us to believe, that war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. All of which is based on selling us fear. This is the basic structure that they want. I'll come to that more in a minute. But basically what we're looking at is the centralization of power, incessant centralization of power, for a simple reason that if there's a few of you and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making. The more diversity there is, the less control you're going to have over it. So you want to centralize everything. And that's why the world has been hurtling towards centralization of power in all areas of our lives for centuries. And it's got faster. Why has it got faster? Simple equation. The more you centralize power, the more power that you then have to centralize even quicker. And this is where the momentum of speed has increased and increased. But before I start this section, again, I want to emphasize the information from the first part, which is we live in a illusory reality in terms of solidity. We are decoding reality. It's a kind of a virtual reality experience that we're having. We are consciousness. They want to put us in that state of detached consciousness and limit the frequencies that we are decoding, and therefore control the reality that we experience. And so what I'm looking at here in this section as I start a chronological story is I'm looking at a timeline, one reality within what even mainstream scientists are now talking about, these different realities, parallel universes and stuff, which interpenetrate each other. This is one timeline. That's all. It's the timeline that we are decoding. But there are many other timelines, many other realities interpenetrating this one, and also there's a hell of a lot more to know than I've got so far. It's an interim report. It's always going to be. So, we go back, we can pick this story up in this timeline in ancient times, prehistorical times, in terms of official history, where there were, it would appear, two great civilizations which made together a global civilization, one based on a landmass which has become known as Atlantis, and one which has become known as Mu or Lemuria. And these were advanced, very advanced civilizations with, in many ways, knowledge beyond what is available in the public arena today. And they went to great technological lengths, great understandings, for instance, in how you can create a magnetic field which then makes vast stones basically weightless, and you can push them along and maneuver them around. Great technological advancement, at least among the elite. These civilizations came to an end, it seems, with great cataclysmic events. It's interesting that when you've got studies which put together the ancient folklore around the world describing what the Bible calls the Great Flood, but that's just one version of the same recurring story in every ancient culture. And then you look at the geological and biological record of the Earth, the two correlate in terms of great cataclysmic events which cause fantastic geological upheavals. Of course, the story of Noah in the Bible, which is a rewrite of a much older Sumerian story, which probably is mirrored, in fact is mirrored all over the world using different names for Noah. That is the most famous one of the Great Flood and the Great Cataclysms, but it is just one. The survivors of these advanced civilizations, and indeed before, moved out into other lands, and they took with them this advanced knowledge that was part of that once global society. But now these societies became isolated, and that original knowledge started to go its own way. Same knowledge, but it started to be expressed in different ways, using different symbolisms, different tools, different names, etc. And this story is also why, when historians and others have gone into these places, like the Maya and South America and the Maya in Central America and other places, they were astounded when they first apparently discovered these civilizations, these groupings of people, that the same basic stories that they were telling, religious stories and other stories that they were telling in Europe, were being told by these other societies that apparently had no connection to Europe whatsoever, because we've just discovered you. Well, these original stories come from the original knowledge that's just got isolated. They're the original stories from the pre-historical times of the global society, the Golden Age, as some accounts call it. And I started to see this as I've traveled around the world, where you see the same knowledge expressed in different ways, because it's just gone its own way because of the isolation. Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, he throws carved bones in different symbols to read energy fields, to predict the future or read the future. And what you do is you brought this basket of these bones and you put your hands over them. What it's doing, you're impregnating your energy field into these bones, the energy fields of the bones, because everything's energy. And then he throws the bones, and where they land in relationship to each other makes him read the signs. Because what he's doing is reading your energy field. Because as I kind of saw as I was watching this happen, when you put your magnetic field into those bones, the vibrational state of your magnetic field is a vibrational pattern or imprint of you, your state, and also the deeper levels of consciousness that you have that have an awareness of what is to come. And these bones have an energy field, and their energy field reflects what they symbolize. So if they symbolize a certain concept, then they will carry the energy of that concept. So when you put your hands in, or your energy in, it makes a magnetic connection. These different energy fields, called bones when we've decoded them into holograms, connect into your energy field and sync with the magnetic patterns that you've got, and they fit in where their magnetic patterns fit into you. And so where the bones land and how they appear on the floor is decided before they're thrown. It's decided in the basket by the magnetic connections that have been made. And this is also why you get the same thing with rune stones, because rune stones are just exactly the same knowledge expressed in a slightly different way. This is where tarot cards come from. Why do you pick that card and not that one? Magnetic connection, same thing. And it's the same knowledge, that same original global knowledge. Also, as these peoples with these advanced knowledge and understandings went into other areas of the world, not just after the cataclysms, but also before it, they were the people that had the knowledge to build these fantastic ancient structures that even today people say we couldn't build that now, or we'd struggle to. How did they do it, these primitive people? Because they were working with this advanced knowledge. But history just shuts this stuff out because it doesn't fit the song sheet. In Peru, you've got, this is just one example, these stones are hundreds of tons. You couldn't get a cigarette paper between them, they're so brilliantly put together. These are the Nazca lines in Peru, in the Nazca Plains, and these depictions of animals and insects and birds that are created by scoring the top surface of the land away, they can only be seen in their entirety, some of them, at 2,000 to 3,000 feet, or in plains of considerable height, because they're so vast. Primitive people did that? No. Great knowledge did that. And this is a very significant area of the world in terms of the recovery from the cataclysmic events and the resettlement of these peoples from this global society. People in conventional history, they call, for instance, Sumer, Mesopotamia, what we now call Iraq, the cradle of civilization. No, it wasn't the start of civilization. It was one of the major points of recreation of a civilization after the cataclysmic events had brought an end to the old one. And what we're seeing now, and what's happening, is this global society is now re-emerging in another way as these formerly isolated societies start to connect together again. In fact, it's been going on, of course, for a very long time. And another connection that you have between these areas and many other areas in the world is of an interbreeding between a non-human race, force, whatever, and humans, creating a hybrid bloodline, a fusion of the two DNAs. Even in Genesis, we have one version of this, but you find this all over the world, in every culture. As the Bible says in Genesis, there were giants on the earth in those days, or in the earth as it puts it, and also after that, where the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. These hybrid bloodlines, this interbreeding, produced the kings and queens and the elite royal families of the ancient world, where they claim their right, their genetic right to be the king or the queen or the leader because of their connection to the gods. And all over the world you find this. And what do we have today? We have the queen as head of state of this country purely because of her DNA. If she had a different DNA, she might be cleaning the throne, not sitting on it. You know, that's how ludicrous it is. And this is where it comes from. These people claim to be elite and special because of this hybrid bloodline nature connection to the gods. And in Sumer you find the same. Sumer, which became Babylon, which became Iraq, has ancient texts and tablets which describe the same recurring global story of this interbreeding to create this hybrid race. The hybrid race became known as the demigods, part human, part God, because of this interbreeding connection. And from here, they went out all over the world. So the invasion of Iraq and the occupation of Iraq now is not just about oil. It is about oil on one level, yes. It's about many things, but it's also because that area of land, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, is considered of great significance to these bloodlines for historical reasons, because that's where a lot of them came out of. So this hybrid bloodline went off across the world, up into northern Europe. It became the power behind the Roman Empire and the creation of the Roman Church, which became, of course, global Christianity. Much more about that as we go along. And everywhere it went, it became the royal bloodline, the elite bloodline, the one that became the leaders and the kings and the queens, and also the people in charge behind the scenes. And it interbred with other such bloodlines in northern Europe to become the royal families and aristocratic families of Europe. Then, because of the European empires particularly the British, but the French and others too, but particularly the British, we had global Babylon, global Sumer, the global elite bloodline expansion. They went all over the world. They said the sun never set on the British Empire, so vast was it. Into Australia, into Africa, all over the world they went through colonization. And then we had this sleight of hand called independence for the former colonies, but it was only independence on the surface. What these bloodlines did was leave out in those former colonies the bloodline and the secret society network, which I'll come to, which manipulates the bloodline and its gophers and agents into positions of power. And they've gone on controlling those countries ever since. And so today, these hybrid bloodlines are known as the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, and they're the ones that control the transnational corporations, governments, the banking system, the whole shebang that dictates and controls the direction of society. More of that later. And the idea, of course, because compared with the global population, there's very few of these people. The idea is to enslave the rest of humanity in that vibrational prison I've been talking about, so the few can control the vast majority by controlling the frequencies and the nature of the reality we construct. Oh, Queen's lizard. Now, who are they? Who are they? God. When I first came across this old bloody story, I thought, why me, you know? What are they bloody going to say about this? They thought I was bloody mad before. But I don't care. Who are they? Who are they, the interbreeders? I never went looking for this, but over years and years, starting in about the mid to late 1990s, as I travelled around the world talking to no bugger at the time, I came across increasingly large numbers of people who told me this recurring story from different points of perspective, and many of them who'd experienced it, a quote on the inside, that this interbreeding was between a reptilian type race and humans, and they had created a hybrid bloodline. And it was this bloodline that was occupying the positions of power across the world. So not a racist thing in terms of earth races, because these buggers interbred all over the world. As Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, told me, a lot of the black political or black leaders and prime ministers that were put in positions of power after the colonial powers apparently left, their bloodline went back to the same source, according to him. It's all over the world. It's not a racial thing from an earth point of view. Now again, going back to the first section, these people don't see interbreeding like we see interbreeding. They are creating a software program. By interbreeding with humans, they create a reptilian-human software program which has influences on behavior and perception from both, and also influences on what you decode and what you don't decode. And they want to hold this software program because it's the software program they use to control. And so they have obsessively interbred with each other right the way through history. You know, we talk about royal families, oh, they interbreed because to keep the genes up. Well, it's kind of like that. What they're doing is holding a software program which is diluted very, very quickly when it's interbred outside of itself with the general population. And so still today, you have arranged marriages among elite families that are nothing to do with love and affection and attraction, but to do with genetics and producing the next generation of software programs, if you like. And these ancient cultures, they all have their stories of this interbreeding between a reptilian race, and it's not all reptilian, but this seems to be a predominant factor, and humans. In fact, the ancient emperors of China used to claim the right to be emperor because of their descendants from the serpent gods. Everywhere you find this reference in different phrases and names to the serpent gods. And out of here, the Sumer, Egypt, Babylon area, came some of the most significant bloodlines, which then moved up across the world to become the ruling, controlling families of today. And like I say, all over the world you find the serpent symbolism, the serpent stories, and the worship of the serpent is the oldest religion. They found, I think it was last year sometime, close to the Kalahari Desert, or around the Kalahari Desert in South Africa, evidence of serpent worship 70,000 years ago. And it does go back that far because these guys have been around that long. When I started coming across this, first of all, in what you might call the Western world, where I was meeting these people who'd had these experiences and come across this information, I then went to South Africa to speak, and I got contacted. This is why he contacted me originally, Credo Mutwa. And he said, how do you know about the Chitahuri? Because he just read the book, The Biggest Secret, which was the first time I introduced this. Who the hell's the Chitahuri? And it translates as the children of the serpent or the children of the python. And this is a painting by Credo Mutwa from ancient and modern descriptions of these Chitahuri. Although it's only one type, just like with humans, there's many, many types. And he told me that when he was first initiated into this shamanistic knowledge, long, decades and decades ago now, he learned about the Chitahuri. And he said that when the colonial powers came in, here we go again, the British and the Dutch, but particularly the British, through people like Cecil Rhodes, they, in his words, milked the minds of the shaman and then killed them. And they tried to take all this knowledge out of circulation, and it went underground and into their own version of secret societies in South Africa to keep this knowledge alive. And this is where he came across the story of the Chitahuri, although he's seen a lot since to confirm the validity. He also showed me this. This is the necklace of the mysteries, which he, as the inheritor of this shamanistic knowledge, has the right to be given. And it's mentioned in accounts 500 years ago, and he reckons it's at least 1,000 years old. And what he does, because he's the official storyteller of the Zulu nation, of the verbal knowledge, and he has symbols on this necklace of the mysteries which tell the story of Africa and African people and African history. And on pride of place is a non-human figure with a big willy and a woman, and this is their symbolism for telling the story of the interbreeding between humans and this non-human race. Now, interestingly, this willy is now copper, but in the original it was gold before it was stolen for money. And of course then you go back to ancient Egypt, and one of the prime stories of ancient Egypt was of the sun god Osiris with the golden penis. And all that connects into this Sumerian knowledge and this South African knowledge, and it's all to do with the interbreeding. Obelisks, the obsession that Freemasons have with obelisks and stuff, same thing. The phallic symbol, the bloodline. This is the human woman as symbolized, and this is the non-human interbreeder. Now, it doesn't look reptilian, it doesn't look like anything, it looks strange. And I asked him, why does it look like that? And he said, because the Chitahuri said that they must never be depicted as they really are, or they would, anyone that did it would be killed. So he said what they did was depict them as obviously not human, but not looking like they really did, for that reason. Although you still can find some. This is a reptilian baby and woman or goddess, which was found in graves in the Ubaid culture, which preceded Sumer in that same part of the world that we now know as Iraq. There's some more images of it. Again, the serpent worship is all over the world. So this is Credo Mutwa's painting, and this is Neil Haig's symbolic representation of this bloodline, which is a hybrid genetics, and it's a hybrid software program. That's what we're looking at, because it's the hologram that we're looking at. And around the world, you see symbolism, and when you start to come across this information, it's like your kind of mind opens and you start to see, hey, what you hadn't seen before. This bloody serpent symbolism's all over the bloody place. And you find the symbolism of the connection between human women and this reptilian race. You see the symbolism of part man, part reptile, part human, part not human. Again, there's another one. These from different parts of the world. You see a lot of symbolism in stories of humans battling the snake, same thing. And of course, in the Garden of Eden, which is a story that's told in different ways all around the world, you have the serpent. And I was on a Christian radio station a few weeks ago, and they were going on about this reptilian thing. And I said, well, hold on a second. You talk about the Garden of Eden. Do you reckon that Adam and Eve, as they are symbolically called, were actually having a chat with a snake? I mean, does that make sense? I mean, am I mad? Am I crazy? What are you talking about? Or is it more likely that the serpent is actually, or the snake is actually symbolic of something else? And a lot of the gargoyles that you find on churches that were built by the secret society, as like the Knights Templar, and the castles of these elite families have a reptilian look about them. So do many of the coats of arms and stuff that you find in the elite families and military and stuff. The City of London, just down the road from where we are, has a very appropriate symbol, because London, as the bloodlines moved across into Europe, London eventually became, and still is, one of the epicenters of the Illuminati, of these bloodlines. So you had, wherever the bloodlines go, the empires go, because they're acquisitive, they want control. So you had the Roman Empire when they were based in Rome, and they're still massively based in Rome. And when they went and located in London, you had the British Empire, and that expansion, and other parts of Europe. And this is known by researchers who know what they're talking about as Baby-London, because this is sort of the new Babylon. I'm not talking about London in general, the City of London, the financial district, which is its own self-governing province in effect, with its own police force and everything. And that is two reptilian figures holding the badge of the Knights Templar, one of the major secret societies of the Illuminati. There's a bigger version of it. Very appropriate. When you enter the City of London, you pass these things on the side of the road. And the City of London connects into the temple. The temple is named after the fact that the Knights Templar own that land at their temple there. The Knights Templar still run the City of London and the temple area, which is the centre of the legal profession. That's where Tony Blair and his missus trained, and the barristers and stuff, and Inns of Court and all this business. They still control that today. And where the temple meets the City of London, in the centre of the road, is this another reptilian figure. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. So what you have all over the world is this recurring theme, which only when you kind of open your mind to this, you start to say, bloody hell, it's everywhere. Of the dragon and the reptilian imagery. I mean, in the East, in places like Japan and China, where there was also massive interbreeding in China with these entities, it seems, you have the dragon at the very heart of the culture. The Messiah, the word Messiah, it seems, comes from Mesa, which is the Nile crocodile, because the pharaohs were anointed with the fat of a Nile crocodile as part of the coronation. And it also breaks down as anointed one, which is what the word Christ means, anointed one. All these things interconnect in the end, as we'll see as we go along. Even biblical references to the devil have a reptilian serpent imagery about them. This is from Revelation. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Over and over, this same recurring theme. This is a painting that Credo Mutwa did on the side of one of his huts, which is symbolically telling the story of some of the stories told in the ancient African history and legends. And where do I find this again but on the logo of Alfa Romeo? Extraordinary. And on the other side of Alfa Romeo, you have the red cross on the white background of the Knights Templar, the very elite secret society within the Illuminati bloodline network. Silvio Berlusconi, who's just got back into the leadership in Italy, has in his garden that same imagery of the serpent with a human in his body. And he's a major secret society operative, he is. He was in the famous infamous P2 Freemasonry Lodge that came to light in the late 70s and led to the guy, Roberto Calvi, the banker connected to P2, being hung under Blackfriars Bridge just down the road from here. And then around the fairy stories and the other kind of stories and folk stories, you get this recurring theme of the frog prince, the serpent prince, shape-shifting into a human prince or a princess doing the same, and so on. It's remarkable how consistent it is all over the world. And today you've got children's books and stuff which are talking about reptilian morphing into humans and stuff, and what we call shape-shifting. Now, of course, when you're talking about this for the first time, about shape-shifting, I mean, people go, crikey, what is he on? Because understandably, what they're perceiving is a solid body changing into a solid body. Not possible, mate. Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I ain't saying that. Because there is no physical, therefore there's not a shape shift from a physical solid body to another solid body. The Queen is a hologram, like we're all holograms. And if she shifts, it's because the hologram has shifted, the decoding system in the observer has shifted, not her physical body. And what you have are 3 different levels of control, though it goes on further. But that's for another day, another time, and a lot more research. But this is one level of it, which is the dark suits, as I call them. And I found this picture on the internet. I thought, how perfect. They're like hollow shells, holographic hollow shells. Not necessarily all of them, but significant numbers are. Others are just gophers who don't know what's going on and are just play the game without realizing what the game they're playing. Behind them are those that operate in the shadows that I talked about earlier, who, no matter who's in power, what party or what name, the same shadow people are orchestrating events. As they say in America, it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in. And the government are these shadow people who are there, whoever comes in and out with a rosette on or a name of a political party. And then you go one step back and you go out of this dimension, basically, or more accurately, you go out of the frequency range called visible light that we can decode and therefore see as a physical experience. These reptilian entities seem to operate, and again, it's not just reptilian. There are many different kinds of entities that do not have a human form, that operate just outside of human sight, and history has recorded them as demons and all this stuff. But the reptilian part of it seems to be very significant to the controlling systems on the planet today. And they operate just outside of visible light. Therefore, we don't see them in the normal course of events. That's just basically like a ghost. When you're looking at a ghostly figure, most of them don't look solid because they're operating just outside of your frequency, just enough for you to perceive something, but not enough for them to appear to be have solidity. This is very similar to having a radio and it not quite being on the station. You can hear the station, but there's what we call interference, and it's not sharp. Visually, that's what's happening when people see these ghostly, ethereal type figures. So shape-shifting is not the movement from a dense physical body to a dense physical body. It would appear from the endless research that I've done and people I've talked to all over the world and all the rest of it put together, my own experiences sometimes, that what we're looking at are these hybrid bloodlines. Because of the hybrid nature of the DNA, the software program, they have a vibrational sympathy with that which interbred with them. And this doesn't have to be physical interbreeding either, as I'll come to. And so these bloodlines can be, quote, possessed, their emotional, mental faculties taken over much more easily than the general run of the population does not have that hybrid DNA, thus that vibrational sympathy, compatibility between the two energy fields. So what they're doing in effect is using the secret society network they've set up to manipulate these bodies into power, but in doing so they're putting themselves into power because they're controlling the mental and emotional processes of these vehicles. Now, when we look at, say that's a major politician or something, when we look at him with our five-sense sight, we are going to decode that level of him that is operating with invisible light. So what do we see? We see a human. But behind him, just outside of that frequency range, we'd see something very different. And I've met endless people who've seen it, who do have that ability to move their visual frequency range further than the norm. So what is happening is, with shape-shifting, or one way that it's happening, is sometimes that energy field just outside of visible light moves in to that frequency range. It sometimes happens when this vehicle is going through great emotional turmoil. I've had that story told to me many times when people have seen this, the circumstances surrounding it. And at that point, this energy field enters visible light and becomes the prime forward energy field. And then it goes back again. To the observer, who is decoding that energy field through the brain and turning it into a physical experience, what he observes only in his head is human, non-human, human. Did you see that? But it wasn't physical, it was a change in the decoding of the brain of the energy field it's observing. And this interbreeding can happen without coming into the physical, because these are energy fields, and these energy fields can send down genetic codes down into this reality. It's horrible to think about, but I've talked to a number of people around the world, women, who've been in captivity in places like the Mormon network in Salt Lake City, who have been taking part in rituals, obviously forced to take part, who are being raped on sacrificial altars under the Mormon church, other places too, and other organizations, but I'm just thinking of one in particular. And she told me, in the same story I've heard elsewhere, she looked up while this rape's going on, and around the rapist was this ethereal, non-human figure. Through this energy connection, things can be sent through to affect the genetics, the software program of the child that results from that situation. Because to them, like I say, they know it's a computer, and they know the computer software can dictate behavior and perception, and they want puppets. may sound strange, but I feel for a lot of these people in power on the human level, because they're just puppets themselves, like bloody robots. Here you go. A lot of these people are not in control of their own perception. And this is why, you know, what they do a lot is they'll target someone. What they want to know is who's got the bloodline and who hasn't. Because this bloodline genetics won't manifest itself in cold-blooded behavior and all the rest of it that we see unless those codes are open. It's like having a computer. It's got lots of codes, but unless you open them, it doesn't affect the computer screen. In other words, the reality of the computer. You have to open it. And what they do is target a lot of these people this is why they want a DNA database. They want to know who's got it and who hasn't. And that gives them, obviously, a great way of finding out. And then they target these people, and suddenly these people who know nothing about it, they're suddenly sponsored by very powerful people, and they become big in politics and law and all the rest of it. And through that, they get pulled into the secret society network, and they go through these rituals, and they think it's just some, ancient ritual, it's just tradition. They don't realize that what these rituals are designed to do is to affect them genetically to open these codes. And how that manifests itself in experience is of seeing people who, for instance, came into politics with a good intent to try to make a positive contribution, and they end up, after a while, being the absolute epitome of everything they came into politics to challenge. Because there's been a process of personality takeover. It's not always for that reason, but that's one of them. So what we're looking at, I would suggest, but people make of it what they will, are fields where we decode the human one, but behind it is another one that looks anything but human. And someone sent me this picture. I don't know who it's of, but he's got very reptilian-type eyes. And a friend of mine has been working recently with someone who's been involved in a big iris scanning technological program. Not something I agree with, I say, iris scanning, but what he found, and he's into none of this stuff, what he found as these people looked very closely at 2,300 eyes, to their amazement, in his estimation, about 4% of the eyes they looked at were of reptilian type and appearance. All over the internet, people have started talking about this now, and these pictures are circulating. This might be probably is just a trick of the light, but it's very symbolic of what we're looking at. That was on the front of the 14 Times, taking the piss out of me. I thought, thank you very much. Nice picture. I'll have that. Very symbolic. And it's all these other people and all that stuff. And another thing that you find is a number of therapists have sent me pictures. This is a common theme. Therapists working with satanically abused people, trying to get their minds back after all this abuse, and sexually abused people that have been in these mind control projects. And it's a very consistent theme that when these people who've been victims of this, they use a lot of drawing to try to draw out their memories. Again and again, what they draw are people with reptilian eyes. These are actually drawn by a satanically abused person, and these were sent to me with their permission by their therapist. Again, Roman Polanski was talking from knowledge, shall I put it, when he made that film Rosemary's Baby in the 60s with Mia Farrow. And for anyone who doesn't know about that, if you can get hold of a copy, it's worth watching. Mia Farrow is pulled in unknowingly because they want her to interbreed with one of these non-human entities to give birth to a child of the bloodline. And this satanic group get hold of her, and they put her under mind control, and they impregnate her and stuff. And towards the end of the film, when she starts to realize what's going on, she goes into this apartment where it all went on, and memories start to come back, and she sees the baby she gave birth to in a non-conscious state, and you have a quick flash of it in the movie, and it's a reptilian baby with reptilian eyes. Well, Polanski should know, let's put it that way. All the way through history, you have this theme of possession and of fighting the snake or fighting the dragon and all the rest of it. That's the theme I'm talking about, and it's the software hybrid bloodline, which has led to hybrid people, possessed people, being in positions of power. So you look at the human level, but what's behind it? What's behind it? Now, I know something bloody strange is behind this bugger. I know from personal experience. It's very quickly, because I've told this story before. I was in a television, this is the 1980s, 1989. The Green Party, who I was speaking for at the time, had this one big election result in '89, the European elections, and I was asked to go along to Sky Television to comment as the results came in, because it was obvious we were going to do better than we've done before. And I go in to Sky Television, and I walk in, and they send me into this makeup room, and the door was open, and she leads me in, and I think the place is empty. And she sits me down, she says, "Someone will be along in a moment," and walks off. And as I turn as she walked off, I'm looking down to my right, and there's Ted Heath, Prime Minister of Britain from 1970 to 74, the man who signed us into the European Union as it became. And he's sitting there, he's just been interviewed apparently, waiting to have his makeup taken off. So, you know, I looked at him, I said, "All right, mate, how you doing?" All that stuff. Never said a word. He's staring at the mirror on the wall, and he just turned his body, his chair, and he looked at me. Never said a word throughout, ever. He looked at me with a strange look, and then his eyes started at the top of my head, and they slowly went down to my feet, and then went back again. Scanning me is all I can describe it as. And when he got back to the top, he turned and he looked at the mirror. That was kind of strange enough, but when he was doing the scanning, his eyes went completely black. The whites, the bloody lot. I found this picture on the internet, which I think is done by some kind of contact lens or something, but it absolutely encapsulates what I saw. This total blackness. And what I was doing then, when I got into this stuff and I'm traveling around, I started coming across people who talked about these black-eyed people that they'd seen. I think, bloody hell, I've seen that. And I looked on the internet a few weeks ago. I did a little newsletter about this, and I found a number of references to people telling about their experiences of the black-eyed people. Now, when I looked at Heath's eyes in that black state, there was no point where I made eye contact with him. I was looking through him into something else. They were like two black holes. And then, of course, I've gone home to my family and said, you know, you never guess what's happened to me and Ted Heath tonight, what I've seen. But, of course, what is it? I have not got a clue. It's very strange. Then you get on with your life. But later I realized what I'd seen. I'd looked through into another dimension, to the dimension of the entity that's possessing this guy, or possessed him. And this is what is happening with so many of these fellas. Gold, he doesn't have to shift, does he? Cheney. You know, and so you're putting different people into power, but what you're putting into power is the same force. They only appear different because when you decode their 5-sense visible light level, they look different humans, but not necessarily so. And for me, a lot of these people are what I call sentient programs, or what the Matrix movie called sentient programs. Because this is a digital construct on one level, digital people can be put into this construct and appear to be just as real and normal as us, because it's just another hologram. It's just from a different source. So the woman in the red dress in the Matrix movie, which they put into a computer program, and she looked like anyone else, as if she was just a normal person in the street. I think those people exist, the more that I understand this. And some of these people could be them. The more that I look at this, there seems to be three types of people. There's the sentient programs, which are basically software programs playing out their program. And we're not talking about a PC on the desk computer software. We're talking about one that can interact and react and think for itself up to a point. Much more sophisticated. There's other people who are conscious, but their body conscious level is so dominant in the perception of reality, that's basically just a spectator, and then there are others, increasingly more as we wake up in this time that we're living in, that are actually multi-level connected, and those different people will see the same reality in a completely different way. So there we go, the red dress programs, a Neil Haig portrayal. Carl Sagan, the famous American cosmologist, he was so interested in the reptilian influence on human behavior through the reptilian genetics in the body that he wrote this book, The Dragons of Eden, and pointed out that understanding the reptilian history of humans is to understand so much about human behavior. Because the oldest part of the human brain is what they call the R complex in mainstream science, or the reptilian brain. And it is fundamentally influencing our behavior. This is mainstream science, from the reptilian brain, the R complex, we get cold-blooded behavior, no empathy with the consequences for others of our actions, territoriality, control, wanting to own and control everything, desire to control, an obsession with hierarchical structures of power, top-down control by the few, aggression, might is right, winner takes all. These things all come from the reptilian brain. And I have just described perfectly the behavior of these hybrid bloodlines that we call the Illuminati. That's why they can kill and pepper bomb whole cities of civilians, because they have no empathy with the victims and the consequences for them of their actions. You take empathy out, anything goes. The other thing with the reptilian brain, this is really important in terms of understanding how they control us, is this is where in the R complex we get our survival instincts from, fight or flight. And it's great that we have these survival programs, because otherwise we wouldn't last long. It's keeping us alive in this reality constantly, the survival mechanisms. But if you get caught in survival as a state of being rather than a response to a danger, then you are locking yourself into the reptilian brain, which is the genetics and the vibrational structure that these guys completely understand for obvious reasons. And if you look at society, from cradle to grave, we are constantly being given reasons to fear not surviving. Oh, the credit crunch. Oh, the rising food prices. Oh, the war in Iraq. Oh, would Iran do a nuclear bomb? Oh, this stuff. Oh, what about the kids? Oh, my God. And all those feelings of fear, i.e. survival reactions, lock us into the reptilian brain, which is what they want us to do, because then basically we become to an extent a hive brain with them. This is another important area to understand many things that I'm going to come through here. They're energy vampires. They vampire human energy of a certain kind, and therefore we are manipulated to produce that energy, which they then absorb. It's their power source. It's their source of energetic power. They operate just outside of visible light, but when we project emotional energy, stress, fear, anger, hatred, you can't see that appear in front of you when you feel those emotions, because they're not operating with invisible light. They're operating just outside of visible light, at other levels of frequency. And so when we are feeling those emotions and generating that energy resulting from them, they are pouring out of us into these other levels of reality, which is where these entities operate, and they absorb that energy. This lady, Giuliana Conforto, is a trained astrophysicist who wrote this book and many others about the nature of reality through the scientific perspective, but with an open mind, right brain perspective. And she talked to me, I had a long chat with her once for many hours. She talked to me about the existence of interspace planes. If you take this here to be the physical world we're in, and this to be the next dimension. She said there are neutral zones between these dimensions, which she said if you operate there, you're going to need to find yourself an energy source because there ain't one there. I rang Credo Mutwa, and I said to him what she said to me. I said, is there anything in your culture that talks about the same thing? Oh yes, he said, we call them the heaven between heavens. He said, and that's where the reptilians are, or the Chitahuri as he calls them. So here we have the physical world, which, well, quote, that we live in. Here is the non-physical world, and then you have this neutral zone. This is where they operate from, and vibrationally it's really, really close to visible light, and they are absorbing energy from our emotional output into these realms. And I found this in the War Memorial in Canberra, Australia, in the area of the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior. And when you look at who's paid for this war memoriam, it's like a who's who of the Australian Illuminati. And they have these very strange pictures around the thing of soldiers with this energy coming out of them, and just above it are these reptilian entities almost guarding this. And in many ways that's so symbolic of what we're looking at, feeding off that energy. This is another Neil Haig picture of going across these interspace planes and becoming connected without that interference coming from this level. So what we're looking at, it seems, is these entities operate in these interspace planes. They possess the bloodlines within five-sense reality. We are manipulated into the positions of power, and they sit atop these various pyramids with the people. So these guys start wars and stuff like that, which the rest of us fight. We're stupid enough to. And although there appears to be fighting at this level between countries and leaders, really they all answer to the same crew. They're all controlled by the same crew. This is the movie playing out of different people, and they do fight among each other. They bloody do. Anyone who's obsessed with power like that wants power over their associates, but they're connected and operating to the same basic agenda. And if they do get out of hand, well, someone much more powerful knocks their heads together. So like I say, these entities, they can't absorb any energy. They have to absorb energy that is within the frequency range that they're operating on. And they're operating on such a low band of reality and vibration that they can only absorb low vibrational energy, which we give them through low vibrational emotional output, hate, fear, stress, all these things. And there's a guy in Japan, Mr. Emoto, I spent a long weekend with last year, talked to him about all this stuff, and saw him again recently. He's the man that developed this process of freezing water and then photographing the water crystals, which appear for a short time. And so by making different words and vibrational frequencies, by connecting it to the water, like putting words of hate or love on the side of the tank, then freezing it and then photographing it, he's been able to see the different effects of these different emotions upon reality. And this is a water crystal that was from a tank that had the words of love and appreciation on it. This is one that had the words hate all over it. It's a very different energetic structure, and it's this one that these entities want to absorb, therefore what they want us to produce. This again is the love and appreciation. This is a water crystal that had where the tank of water or the receptacle of water had a mobile phone tied to it. So what they want to do, and what they've been doing for centuries, is turning humanity into a war on itself to produce the stress, the hatred, the anger, all these emotions, which then feed into this interspace plane. And of course a war, like the two wars of the 20th century, my God, the energy of that kind that was produced then. I also almost fell off my seat when I watched this Disney movie called Monsters, Inc. Disney being one of these Illuminati corporations, as so many of the others are, most of them are, anyway, perhaps all, could be, probably is. And if you haven't seen Monsters, Inc., the story was that in the monster world, as they called it, they had no energy source. And so what they did, they had a power station in the monster world, and the people working for it used to turn up to work every morning, line up, and then these doors would come up in front of them, symbolic of interdimensional doorways, and then when the hooter went off or whatever, they walked through that doorway and they walked into a child's bedroom in the human world. They went into another dimension. And the monster's job was to frighten the child. When the child screamed, to catch the scream, the fear, in a tube thing, and come back into the monster world to then power that, because it had no energy source. And I thought, sod in hell, I've heard that somewhere before. And of course in the Matrix movies, the theme was of the machines, the controllers, feeding off human energy, and in the words of the Morpheus character, they have turned human beings into one of these. And that's one major level of what's going on, I would suggest. Another point that people say to me is, understandably, is when they're looking at it from a five-sense level, is why would these people, all the way through history, why would they try to manipulate an agenda for the control of the world sometime in the distant future when they wouldn't be here to see it? Well, that's not the way it works. That's just the way it seems to work when you think this world is quote, real and solid and has a time. If you take this to be the human world, and this to be the line of history, we have a version of time which is just manufactured, which appears to give a sequence of events and all the rest of it. Within the interspace plane, they have movable time. They can move up and down this timeline. So they can come in here and they can control someone from the 16th century or the 15th century. They come in here, they're controlling people from what we call the 20th century, because the time is an illusion. So it's been the same entities that have been moving through what we perceive as time all the way through history. And of course, when you get across here, there's no time. And that's why that near-death experiencer said, there is no time, there is no sequence of events, no such thing as limitation of distance, of period, of time, of place. I could be anywhere I wanted to be simultaneously. So can these to a large extent, and therefore they're moving in and out of this timeline. To achieve this, they want puppet people. And to do that, they have to control the coordinates that people have in terms of their perception of reality. And that's what they've done. And they've confused people into being confused, which is the state they want them to be in. And we look at the world and we think it's so complicated and complex and all the rest of it, but there is a very simple structure behind it. Because of what's been going on with the research into this conspiracy, and indeed at our own bloody eyes now, when we look on the news and we see the world the way it is with the centralization of power, it's very difficult now to deny that a few people control the many. It was possible for a while maybe, but not anymore. So what they've done through this book by a guy called David Rothkopf, who worked for the infamous Kissinger Associates and was in the Clinton administration and stuff, he's written this book called Superclass, the Global Power Elite and the World They Are Making. And what it is, in effect, is an admission that yes, there is a super elite and it does control events, but it's not coordinated and it's not controlled. It's like a fallback position. All right, we can't deny a few control the world now, so we'll have a fallback position. Yeah, they do, but they're not coordinated. It's just a loose connection of interests. You know, bullshit. In fact, it's coldly calculated and it's very, very simply constructed. And I want to go through a few coordinates now of how this group, this hybrid bloodline, with the goals that I've described, how it's structured society to bring about its ends. First of all, how can a few control the world? Well, pyramid power, in more ways than one. But this sort of pyramid I'm talking about now. Most organizations today, in fact, nearly virtually all of them, are structured as pyramids. You've got the few at the top. They're the people that know the real game, what the organization's there for, its real agenda, what it's really trying to achieve. As you come down through the organization, you're meeting more and more and more people in the organization, but every time you drop a step, they know less and less and less about what the organization's really about. They only know their contribution. And the idea through history has been to structure society like this, to keep the people in general in ignorance of what they know. That's why this advanced knowledge has been passed over through the highest levels of the secret society network and been sucked out of the general population through inquisitions and ridicule and condemnation and all the rest of it. But every organization is structured like that. So the vast majority of people who are daily making a contribution to creating this Orwellian state have no idea they're doing so, or at least no idea what the end goal is and who's really behind it. This is Albert Pike, a Freemasonic god in America, and from the last century, or the 1800s actually, we're 21st century now, aren't we? What day is it? What planet am I on? And he wrote this: fictions are necessary to the people, and the truth becomes deadly to those who are not strong enough to contemplate it in all its brilliance. In fact, what can there be in common between the vile multitude, that's us, and sublime wisdom? The truth must be kept secret, and the masses need a teaching proportioned to their imperfect reason. So, what they're doing is that ancient knowledge, that ancient advanced knowledge I talked about, they have sucked it out as much as they can out of circulation through inquisitions and all this stuff, but they've passed it on and more across the secret society network. So at that level, not Joe Bloggs, the Freemason, goes down the lodge, they do a nice dinner, not that, right at the top. They're working on a knowledge of reality that I talked about earlier, and they're using it to manipulate the masses, who they keep from that knowledge. And pyramid power works like this too. We think presidents and prime ministers and stuff are at the top of the decision-making process. They're not. They are positioned lower in the pyramid, and they are just vehicles for the shadow people to introduce changes in society through them. So you have an idiot like Bush, and he turns this stuff through legislation into law just by signing his soddy name, when he can remember it, on the bottom of a piece of paper. That's what they're there for. They are vehicles. They're not the source of the power. People say to me, so you say George Bush orchestrated 9/11? Can't tie his shoelaces, mate. No, I'm not saying that. No. Ridiculous. You're a journalist, aren't you? Yes, I thought you were. You thought that elephant was a duck, right? Yeah, I got you. I remember you now. And these pyramids are like Russian dolls, one doll inside a bigger doll inside a bigger doll, to create this global structure. So all these pyramids of the banking system, the transnational corporations, they're pyramids in themselves, like banks. They go into bigger pyramids and bigger pyramids until there's one that encompasses the whole of the banking system, one that controls all the transnational corporations, the political parties, the major parties at least that have any chance of forming a government, the media at ownership level, the religions, bloody come to that soon. The intelligence agencies at that level are the same agency. Mossad is the CIA, is British intelligence if you go up to these levels. Same with the drug cartel, etc. And so up here, you have these bloodline families who are sending down these pyramids, all roads lead to them, the same agenda. And the basis of it is the constant centralization of power and imposition of will of the authorities on the people. And that's why it's happening across all these apparently unconnected areas of society, because they're not unconnected. What you have is one force operating through different sides in the movie. And while we think there are different sides as we experience the movie in visible light reality, we get confused. I mean, he's on that side, and he's fighting him, and he's against her. But in fact, they're controlled by the same people. And you know, if you go into a football match and you control not one side to influence the football match, you control both sides, you know what the score's going to be before the teams go on the field.